Well, welcome back to another episode of the EPS podcast where everything's a primary source. Today I'm talking with Kyle, and Kyle is a longtime friend of mine. In fact, he and I took part in a lot of these pop culture primary sources that we go over when we were going to school together in North Country, New York. So thanks for joining today, and how's everything
Thanks
going?
for having me. Yeah.
I'm glad.
Everything's good. Everything's been going good. Just excited to kind of have a conversation, after the last year having conversations. Doesn't really happen that much,
Yeah.
So
I mean, of course we have to use the medium of Zoom to do it, and
absolutely.
or over the web and everything like that. But it is something that I think we're all missing a lot of, just being able to, shoot the breeze a little bit about things that interest us. And, of course, and then add one more, episode to the ever-growing podcast universe out there, just in case somebody wants to listen for, however long it takes us to talk about, in this case, the 1995 feature Mortal Kombat. Of all things that we can talk about, here it is, Mortal Kombat. And I mentioned to you this the other day when I was proposing this, and I said I've actually never seen this movie, but I wanted to choose it anyway because my mantra is that everything, movies, TV shows, printed work, everything can be looked at as a primary source. And this one is, and it tells you something about the time period in which it was made. So while I didn't see the movie, at least not in any significant, I didn't go to the movies to see it. I think I caught a few of it here and there, probably in like USA Network on a Sunday afternoon one time, since it came out. I of course remember the video game very well.
Yes.
And
who can forget the iconic Mortal Kombat song?
Yes.
I
was actually going to say that I had to make that point of saying this is the movie we're going to talk about, because
not the song.
Easily you could say the song, which I don't think came independently from either of them. I think it was, thankfully it was like incorporated into the movie, but they had the song. They had, the soundtrack to go with it. I know they make toys in that time period. They also had cards, like trading cards and things like that.
Yeah.
I think they probably stopped at some point, didn't make a cereal. I don't think that would have gone over very well.
No, but that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
well, you have to finish your bowl, if you
finish it. Yeah.
Finish it now. So, I learned something pretty interesting about this movie recently, in that, and actually not the movie, but the source material. So, the first question that you ask when I ask when I go over a primary source is, what material is this made from? And for a movie, you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, film, and but the material is also like the intangible things, like ideas. And in this case is, of course, the video game.
Yes.
The
very controversial videotape.
Yeah, super violent. And I seeing it for the first time, it's almost like, where were you when, neither of us were alive when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, but like, where were you during all these milestones? Like, where were you the first time you saw Mortal Kombat?
Yeah. Where were you when NetherRealm's Mortal Kombat was in our arcades, because arcades were a huge thing when we were back then. And there would just be people gathered around these video game cabinets, playing a game that on the surface looked like other fighting games. But then when you won, boy, it came up, finish him.
Yeah, it was crazy.
You would tap a series of buttons and so the person on the screen would be violently killed.
Yeah. And people were just kind of watching it like, oh, and it stood out in video games big time, because like you said, and there's other player versus player fighting games that came out before it, obviously, and were simultaneously popular. Street Fighter 2 being, the big competitor between the two. But it stood out in the arcade but if you were to throw it into, you know, a larger mainstream entertainment, you know, such as movies, it really didn't stand out in that in 1995 to have something full of so much, you know, gore and Goro, you know, but you know, it didn't stand out that much. But in the gaming world, which up until that point was dominated by things like Sonic the Hedgehog running really fast and
Mario,
right, or a racing game like Cruising USA
racing
or
game.
something like that.
Oh yeah,
You know, it's suddenly you have these. It was mesmerizing as a young person watching this. But oh, you know, what is this? And I remember just becoming fixated on it. So of course. Of all the video games out there, this one kind of lent itself to a movie. But what I found out was interesting about this is that originally the creators of the Mortal Kombat video game wanted to call it Bloodsport because they were hoping to make a video game version of the 1980s Van Damme
movie.
Bloodsport, which is essentially the same storyline. And
Yes.
I find that very interesting, because then of course Van Damme stars in the competing movie with this Street Fighter that came out, I think, either a year before or a year after Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, it was very close in time frame. Yeah.
So
and one was successful, one was not.
yeah, we'll let people decide which one is which. I mean, I think both of them walked home with probably close to 6 Academy Awards each. You know, they were bracing at the last, you know, recipient of the night, you know, best picture, and you know, like, oh, is it going to be Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter 2 or, you know, Forrest Gump? You know, which I think Mortal Kombat, you know, edged them all out. But so you know, what does that tell you, that a video game was able to inspire, you know, a movie? What does that tell you about 1990s America?
Well, for me, I think there's a lot of things within the pop culture of that time that delved on a lot of controversy. There was what OJ and all these Clarence Thomas. There was a bunch of stuff where controversy kind of sold, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Springer. I don't know if that's too early for Jerry Springer. I don't know the dates of that, the Springer show, but like I really felt like movie studios grabbed on this controversial subject of Mortal Kombat, which was having conversations in Congress and led to rating systems for video games and all these different things, and said, hey, this is another way that we can make money, because right now this is a hot name. And not everybody had video game systems in their homes or, you know, could go to arcades and play these things. A lot of people did, but what better way to reach a larger audience and make money off of a intellectual property than making a movie?
Yeah, because they know that, and I know for us, the mall that we went to, right around the corner from where Mortal Kombat was being featured as a video game, was the cinemas, you know, was the, you know, the movie theater. So in a lot of ways, you know, you're absolutely right about that. You know, you have all these controversial things on television, on the news, surrounding us, but the mall is where we get to partake in it. You know, that's, you know, you get to get your BK Big Fish, play Mortal Kombat, and then, you know, not that BK Big Fish is controversial, but you know, be able to then just go right down and you know, just kind of be surrounded by it all the time. You know, there was no escaping, and people didn't really want to escape it either. But that's an excellent point about, you know, how, you know, why wouldn't they want to make a movie out of this? It'd be foolish for New Line Cinema, which, you know, they had their origins with the Nightmare on Elm Street series, you know, in the early 80s, and, you know,
which had its own controversy.
Exactly. And you know, they had that built-in audience, you know, even if that the original audience in 1984 was, you know, 11 years older by this point, you know, that they had that built-in young person, teenager, young adult viewership. So match made in heaven, really.
Yeah.
So the next question is, there's a couple questions that can be put together, but how is this made, and then who likely made it? I'm looking at the IMDb right now, and of course the it tells you how it's made. In most cases, you have a movie. In most source material for movies are things like books. It's a pretty common thing to have when you see the writer of a movie. It'll sometimes say like J.K. Rowling book. Not for Mortal Kombat, but for Harry
Although
Potter.
That would be very interesting.
Right. Who knows? If they ever made a fighting game out of Harry Potter, which we can go back to that in a minute, because as far as those player versus player fighting games, Mortal Kombat is definitely not the last one. They applied it to almost every single property out there. But in this case, it's the writing credits are given to the first two are from the video game developers themselves, and then it was to Kevin Droney. And so it was made by, you have scripts, you have this material, you go and you get these actors, Christopher Lambert being the biggest name of the cast. And it's funny because they gave, as silly as Mortal Kombat the movie is, they really gave a lot of a backstory to it.
So it's
more than you'd think.
Really. So it was kind of interesting because like the game itself, storytelling wise, that's really not the draw for the game back then. And to create a movie, it can't just be 90 minutes of people punching each other. There's got to be a story. And so I think the movie really became the primary source for the lore of the Nether Realms and the Mortal Kombat tournament. And it really just kind of expanded from that. I think even after the movie, they started doing comic books and of course, fan fiction, and and then of course it led into other games, which after the first one really kind of started to develop a story after the movie. So it's kind of, the movie was I think it was made in an attempt to try and make some money off of a controversial subject matter, really kickstarted it to go further into what it is today.
And there are, according to what I'm looking at here, there's like about a dozen other Mortal Kombat movies. Some went into the theater, others were direct to DVD,
animated films,
and I think a series, and
HBO Max just this within the last 6 to 8 months released a new movie.
In the same studio, and it's almost like, well, I mean, everything else. When I go with my son to the toy section of the store, I see not only just the same kind of properties, but actually the actual packaging from when you and I were kids. And it's very clear that they know that, we are, our generation, Gen X, early millennials are having, they're raising kids now. And, between the two kinds of things that we're going to buy them, either something that we know nothing about or something we're very familiar with.
Right. And that because packaging is very nostalgic for us.
Yeah.
So we want to buy it for our kids. Are we buying it for our kids, or are we buying it for ourselves to relive our youth? Yeah.
Or has our youth even ever died? Because I think that our generation, largely because of things like VHS, and I talked about this last time with Batman, because of things like VHS and, like you mentioned, HBO, all the options to watch movies over and over again, or in the case of a video game, I mean, as long as these our youth isn't necessarily coming back, it's just, has it ever left, and is it informing so just going down the list of these questions, how is it made? You're absolutely right about that, as far as is made from a video game into a movie, which then translated into all these other things. It was like an explosion of Mortal Kombat, so much so that it made it as one of those many things in 90s and beyond that's just always there. You're always going to have, it's stuck. It's like so many other things that never has really gone away, including so the director of the movie is Paul W.S. Anderson, and the names sound really familiar when I looked it up. And he has, not only was he, I think he was chosen to do Mortal Kombat because he had done he's an English director, and he had done a movie the year before called Shopping, which was known for its ultra violence. And so of course they're like, oh, well, we have this, Mortal Kombat title and it's going to be ultra violent. So why don't we have somebody that dabbles in that anyway? I guess,
your territory. Yeah.
Martin Scorsese might've been busy doing other things like that. Let's see if he'll do Mortal Kombat. But he also he went on to direct a movie like Event Horizon, which I want to say you and I saw that together in the theater.
We did, and that movie still terrifies me. There's aspects of that film that just creep me out, and it's a very I don't want to call it simple.
No,
but
I was confused through a lot of it, but in a good way. Like I was, I was glad they weren't explaining things to me.
Yeah, the idea of that movie just shakes you sometimes. Of the possibility of deep space travel and ending up in hell.
Yeah. Whoops. Not again. I mean, and visually it has a lot in common with, just the tones, the contrast, the saturation,
color schemes.
You can tell that, this was his style. And then he went on to write another, he's given credit for writing Resident Evil Apocalypse. So another video game turned movie, and by the end of the 90s and into the early 2000s, video games had become very cinematic. And I'm wondering how much of an influence movies like this had on that. I used to sit and watch people, like when I was in college, I would just watch my friends play video games. And I'm like, I was perfectly content just watching, not playing, because I was like, well, it's basically like watching a movie, really. All these.
Yeah. That really kind of brings me back to old school BioWare and their Mass Effect games and the Knights of the Old Republic games and Jade Empire, where the gameplay was fun, but it was really more about story, decision making, how that affects the game moving forward. And so I think story really becomes important. And I think that I don't give it credit, but it might very well be because of, what happened with Mortal Kombat, where a movie pushes a subject matter forward into the future just by adding storytelling.
It's pretty incredible what that can do. And so, I could be wrong about this, but it seems like the controversy over the video game really petered out by the time that the movie came out. It was almost like those who were trying to fight it, just kind of said, all right, well, it's now just part of the, the ether, it's like, it's part of the atmosphere now. It's just, all right, it's here. And because the movie didn't really, because like I said before, it just kind of fit in with all the other violent movies of the time period. But its effect, therefore, what you're saying is that, it went on to really up the ante as far as expectations on the video game console, back at its home base of saying, all right, now you actually have to have more to it than just, a blue hedgehog running around in circles, and, he has to do something more. And then,
but it's true because even talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, like it started off as just the blue hedgehog running around collecting rings, and at the end of a level, you fight some dude riding around in a robot. And then now Sonic the Hedgehog is like storytelling and RPG elements. And
they made a movie out of that.
They make a movie out of that. So
it's
was the Mortal Kombat movie super successful? I don't think that, as you jokingly said, it was going to win any Oscars,
No.
but it certainly did set a precedent, um, for the viewer of what a video game movie could be.
Yeah. And almost like, because I feel like even if you weren't a vocal supporter of the game, by saying that I'll defend Mortal Kombat, up and down. I think people in our age group really just were like, hey, what's the big deal? Like we like this game. It's fun. It's cool, and so this was almost like the another merit badge to prove that it wasn't just a shock value, flash in the pan
Right.
type event
Yeah.
that, they're like, well, this has the goods enough to make a movie out of it and a song and, all
And a song.
right,
And a
and a song.
song.
And all the other merchandise, that it's not just a because if somebody knew nothing of the game and just looked at the cover art of with the dragon, and saw
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat, it could stand on its own as a martial arts movie. It's not
Yeah.
that crazy to imagine, especially considering it started out as it
Blood
was going
sport.
to be a
Yeah.
video game of an actual martial arts movie. So I think we've already answered this question about why did they make it. I think we've answered that up and down.
Yeah.
And but we can use this time to talk about what inspired them to make it and what that tells you about the 1990s America, in that overall it was a time of good economic prosperity. There was people had a little bit more extra money to spend on things, and I used to see 25 cents of that money up on the window of the Mortal Kombat video game. I remember I never understood
Oh yeah, no,
the
that meant
etiquette,
that you
but
were up next. That meant you
and
were up
but
next. You were saving your turn in line.
yeah, but I'm like, how do you differentiate between the quarters? Like, how do you? I never understood the etiquette behind it. I was like, okay, so, but yeah, people, so I was like 14 when this movie came out. Not really old enough to have like a full time, obviously not a full time job, but or even a part time job. Really, I was delivering newspapers. Made a little extra
Yep.
money here
I,
and
I
there.
did that too. Yep.
You remember, yeah, same paper too. And so you'd have enough in your pocket to go and buy a CD at the we didn't have FYE, it was something else before that, but that store.
Yeah. Oh God, what was the name of that store?
Because there
That
was,
long dead store.
yeah, Saturday Matinee was
Saturday
one,
Matinee.
but
Yes.
then they combined with the music store and it became FYE.
Yep.
And so you'd have enough money to buy that, maybe some fast food, and again, the mall was it. That's where you went. You just went to the
Yeah.
mall. We didn't go into town for any of that stuff. And I think that was just kind of that was 90s America, especially for young people. It was we
The
would
mall.
kind of
Yeah.
the mall was like the physical manifestation of cable television. And you'd get your instructions from MTV, and MTV wasn't limited to just music. Definitely not by 1995. They were involved
No,
in everything.
remote control and all these different. Yeah.
MTV Sports, they had a promotion earlier in the decade with Sega for where they're going to crown the world champion Sonic the Hedgehog player as a
Yep.
promotion for Sonic 3. They were doing MTV Movie Awards. I mean, like, they were the kings
Yeah.
of pop culture. And I used to, when I'd get home from school
I
as a
think
teenager.
MTV probably could have taken some pointers from Mortal Kombat at this point.
How do you mean, like, just as far as
MTV is just kind of uh, disappeared as a pop culture leader.
right? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
In 2021, you're right. And I had a realization the other day, why and when that happened, almost the exact moment, that somewhere around 2005, 2006, they actually offered Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, they offered him $1.5 billion to buy Facebook. That MTV was going to own it if they, outright, and he turned them down. He said, I think I can. It's worth more than that. And I feel like in that moment, MTV's, by that point, waning dominance of being the hub of popular culture expired. That was it. And it was passed the torch officially to the internet. Because in 1995, definitely the internet was not, that wasn't our go-to. I didn't have the internet at my house.
No, not at all. No,
I only had a few friends.
Cable television, friends, word of mouth. Yeah. It's funny because you bring that up, and it reminds me of Blockbuster.
Yeah.
And Netflix. Because Blockbuster was king back then, and Netflix was this. I don't know what kind of audience you have on your podcast here, Eric, but people don't always realize that Netflix and chill used to take 3 to 4 business days in the mail.
My first go around
to get your DVDs. Your DVDs and stuff came in the mail. There was no quick, easy way to stream things. And Netflix, when they started out, they said, hey, they went to Blockbuster and they said, hey, we're willing to sell you our company. And Blockbuster laughed them out of the boardroom.
That's right. And they didn't see the vision for the future.
Yep. And now there's no more Blockbuster.
And that's so funny.
Netflix is huge.
Yeah, because they took the they must have either guessed right or saw something that nobody else did. And that's, I guess, something I should also bring up about the time period is that the 90s, and I mentioned this because the movie I did for the last episode was from 1989, which in a lot of ways is the last decade of the 20th century. The 90s were getting ready for the next one, because and I remember hearing a lot, whether it be in school or just kind of out there, people being like, well, it's the 90s, so act accordingly, like we're 90s kids, you didn't hear that really before that time period. And it was almost like taking this kind of huge responsibility of being like, we are the last. In my head.
Yeah.
We are, the year 2000's approaching quick, and we need to really, bring things all together. And, we better look the part too. We got to be futuristic. We got to be edgy. We got to be,
I remember. So your comment, the 90s, this is the 90s, man. Like, it brings me back to that Suburban Commando movie with Hulk Hogan.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. I just remember the ad.
He's like, what are you going to do? Beat me up? And this big burly dude's like, no, man, this is the 90s. I'm going to sue you.
Exactly. Everyone was so acutely aware of the time period. Like, you don't hear that as much. I mean, I guess if we really look closely into movies and TV shows from the 80s and the 70s, you might hear it. Maybe. I think the 80s is probably the earliest that you'd hear that kind of thing. You wouldn't really have people saying, well, it is the 70s. So, no, but it's like, it's such a 90s thing. I'm so glad you brought up that clip.
Weird transitional decade where it was like the 2000s were coming, and like we were all preparing for Y2K, but we were kids. We were just trying to live our lives and have fun, and it was full of all these wonderful, bright colors and controversial things that we loved even more because they were controversial.
Yeah.
That was me for Mortal Kombat. I loved Mortal Kombat. And I remember having my Sega Genesis and getting a home copy of that game.
Yeah.
And putting it in there and playing it. And then my friends going, oh, there's a special code you can put in. It'll turn the blood on, because they had taken the blood out of the game.
Yeah, because Super Nintendo
out of the game for the home version of it.
Yeah,
but the coders had put the little thing in there where you could turn it back on.
And especially in the days of the early internet, where that wasn't widely shared. It was like, you're in the know. If you found out, again, through word of mouth, or in the line at lunch, and somebody like, hey, guess what, just hit up down down AB,
oh, and I figured out how to do this guy's fatality here. I wrote it down because I figured it out.
Yeah.
and that's how everybody learned
Everyone
everything.
just had a
There
piece of
was no
paper.
internet. There was, yeah.
Right.
Now
Nothing reliable.
I downloaded one of the newer Mortal Kombat games recently because of our preparation of this conversation, just to kind of like, what's new, what have you, right?
Yeah.
And like I go, I really wish I knew how to do these fatalities. I'm gonna look it up on the internet.
Yeah. There's no challenge anymore.
There's no challenge anymore.
We've
Um,
and
but
it's in,
but wow, it has since become more shocking.
I can only imagine. Well, I mean, because I look back at a lot of things in the 90s and compare it, to present day or even just 10 years afterwards. And
Yeah.
some stuff holds up, but a lot of it, you're like, wow, people made a big deal about that.
Yep.
That the ante has been pumped up, and I think a lot of it has to do with competition, because there's so many other things out there that
Yep.
are 19, like we keep reiterating, in 1995 the internet was in its infancy, so there wasn't a lot of distraction. It's like, do I play a video game, watch a movie, or sit in
Or
front of
play
my
outside.
computer and listening to it whine and try to get online for 10 minutes so I can check. It's like, so you have all these things.
Noise.
So by the
That
time you
noise.
get to 2021 and leap ahead just 30 25 years, and you have all these other things that are competing for not only your attention but your reaction. I would be very surprised if you said that it wasn't, oh no, it's the same as that game. Like,
Yeah.
Kano's still there, Goro's still doing his thing, and
But I will tell you, way more storytelling. Whereas before, with back in the 90s, the game was, you picked a fighter and they'd show you the list of fighters that you were going to fight in like a tower.
Yep.
And you'd go from fight to fight to fight to fight. Nothing in between. Just that's what you did. And at the end, you might get a couple of still shots with some print on it that tell you what the character did after.
Yeah.
Right. But now, and I think this goes back to what I was saying about the movie really driving that lore forward, is that now you start a game like that and the character, there's story. Yeah. And then you go to the fight within the story. Like, it's a cut scene. and then you go into the game.
And the fight kind of makes some sense instead of just being like, why?
It's not just
against this guy.
Okay, yeah. What are the? Yeah. What did he step on his Pumas or?
Yeah.
Don't step my Pumas.
Yeah, this is 1994, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's so I suppose we could have done the game itself as well as the movie, but a big difference between the game, the original game and all the other versions of the game, it's highly democratic in that you can choose your player, whereas so few games at that point had that option. You could be Mario, or if there's two of you, Luigi. You could be maybe one of two characters, but most games it was just, you had no choice. You start playing and you're the person that it tells you to be. Whereas
it's a double dragon, right? You're either red or blue.
Right. And
Contra, you're either red or blue.
And so Mortal Kombat's like, oh, I like that guy with the sunglasses, or the guy that kind of looks like the Terminator. I'll be him, or any of those. And they had in the first one just one female character, but by the several others, there was other women in the game, and so everybody had their own. But movies take away from that a bit, and I'm curious if that, not that they could have had a choose your own adventure movie at that time, especially not in the theater.
I think at that time, yeah,
because they do stuff like that.
Adventure books,
yeah. I mean, those were huge back then too. So it's funny how all these things just kind of I guess it goes back again to in the time period, and before, there was a lot of especially young kids who were trying to find a way. They were trying to find a group that they could attach themselves to. They could, somebody to share interests with. They and to kind of live that out through a video game, it was a way to do that, and have some kind of comradeship, or an interest that others didn't, or in the case of a video game like this, you could identify perhaps with one of the characters more than others. There's two characters in the game looked pretty much identical, but yet they were fire and ice. You had Sub-Zero and Scorpion.
Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Yeah, get over here.
Yeah.
Right. There's a line from the game that has really kind of become a primary source as far as even dialogue, because people will say that all the time. Even people that aren't avid Mortal Kombat players or
might not know anything about it.
They're aware of it. They're aware of that phrase and they use it
and it's found its way into our language is like
a lexicon of all its own.
Yeah. So I think we've also, I feel like we're ahead of ourselves on a lot of these, but the intended audience, like we said, young men especially, at least at first. I think if you were watching on TV and going to see movies and going to hanging out at the mall and reading reading Spin magazine, or all that kind of like alternative. I remember thinking it was kind of cool because I watched kung fu movies. I'm like, I'm and you saw a lot of that kind of stuff. It was alternative kind of stuff. Like it wasn't the mainstream, and so that was definitely the audience that the movie was made for. Fans of the game. Again, I don't think too many people would be like, what is this Mortal Kombat thing all about? Let me go see this movie and find out. Before I play the game,
it was
I like
a very specific target audience. Yes.
Yeah. Like they're like, these kids have money and they're gonna spend it. So let's give them everything we can. And giving them that. So the next question is, what ideas or behavior does this convey? So I want to just read the synopsis of this movie. And I have some ideas about this. Let me see if it works for you. So based on the popular video game of the same name, Mortal Kombat tells the story of an ancient tournament where the best of different realms fight each other. The goal, 10 wins to be able to legally invade the losing realm. Outworld has so far collected 9 wins against Earthrealm, so it's up to Lord Raiden and his fighters to stop Outworld from reaching the final victory. So I read that and I think about so many movies from that era and other eras where at stake is not just like a person's property or a city or even a nation. In this case, it's the entire earth is at stake. Think about the following year in movies, you had Independence Day, where once again the entire globe is under the exact same threat simultaneously, and we have to unite to fight against a common thing. So the first thing that mentions my mind is that in 1990s America, one of the big things that was kind of just an accepted part of life was global warming. Recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle. Make sure you throw your glass in this container and your plastic in that container. Don't litter. Don't
Captain
pollute.
Planet.
Exactly, Captain Planet and the Planeteers, and that is our responsibility, to fight against these kinds of, outward threats. So, with Independence Day, it's they never really explain, at least in the original movie, who these aliens are, where they came from, and really it doesn't matter. It's they're threatening the planet and they're going to destroy it unless we do something about it, to fight back. And then so once again, here's these Earth Realm fighters, which in the video game Lord Raiden was just one of the guys. He wasn't I don't know if at the ending part, kind of like in American Graffiti, like they give him his what happened afterwards, but Lord Raiden in the game was just one of several selections, but in the movie they give him a much bigger role. And here's this lightning god, that can shoot lightning out and kind of like a storm, or I can't help but think that there is, even if they weren't intentionally doing that the reason why they came up with such high stakes because Bloodsport had nothing to do with that. Bloodsport is like this underground fighting tournament that if you win, you're the champ, and that's it.
Yeah,
so what do you think?
Toughest.
Do you think I'm off the mark with that one, or do you think it's?
I think, man. So like, I think we discussed like the game when it came out. There wasn't really a story, right?
Yeah.
The story was, this is a tournament, and that's because, like you said, the creators wanted it to be like Bloodsport. We just said Bloodsport was just, hey, you win this, you're the toughest guy on the planet, you're good to go. But Hollywood needs there to be some kind of risk, right? Mm-hmm. Risk reward winning, right? Like, I think even going back to the 80s and saying, with the Terminator movies, or even in the 90s, Terminator 2, right? Mm-hmm. Come with me if you want to live, right? I'm going to save you, because if I don't save you, the world is going to end as we know it. And now we have Raiden coming in, collecting his fighters. Come with me, fight this tournament, or else we're all going to die.
Yeah.
So kind of that translates into the Hollywood norm that brought people to the movies.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean it's absolutely accurate that you can't you're not gonna. But it's funny that they even decided to go that far with such a built-in audience. That right. That when they go back home to play their Sega Genesis, they're like, man, I didn't realize how much I was responsible for here.
What did this movie ended up? What was the rating on this back in the day? Did it end up with a PG-13 rating?
Let me check, because I think. Yep, PG-13. So they must have toned down enough of the violence in the movie.
You got to get people in the seats, right? But you have to remember, so like we're talking about a target audience of kids ages 10 to 16, right? Mm-hmm. And we're making this for them. But there's going to be some people that are bringing these kids to the movies. Their parents.
Yeah.
And so maybe that added story was put in there for them. It's kind of like when we take our kids to Disney movies and stuff. There's always those hidden jokes in there, right? Mm-hmm. Those references those aren't for the kids. They make the kids laugh, but they don't know why they're laughing. And we sit back and go, this is great. And I'm enjoying this now too. I think about the last Frozen movie that we brought the kids to, Frozen 2. There's a scene where the guys, I think Kristoff is singing in the woods, lost in the woods, and it's this incredibly great 80s hair band rock ballad song. And I'm going, yes, this speaks to me, an older adult.
And the kids are like, whatever.
That was a horrible song. No, it's great. It's really
I want to see when they come, the next part with,
Yeah.
Yeah,
so maybe that's added. I mean, making Lord Raiden the defender of Earth and having this plot line of all or nothing, destroy the planet or win it all, really kind of spoke to maybe not the target audience, but part of the audience that was going to be there to keep people coming and get maybe even make the target audience larger for future. Stuff.
Like, well, telling their friends, like, it's not that bad. I went to, I brought my kid to see it, and
but there's this great song in the movie that you definitely go just to hear that song. You're gonna have to loop this song in on this podcast because it'll just be great. Maybe we could start it off that way.
Yeah, maybe I'll use that as the intro. I mean, now that and the more I look at it too, I'm like, okay, so it says legally invasive. So there's some kind of rule of law in this ancient tournament where the different realms have come up with the parameters to invade each other, that you have to get so many different wins. And so I know it precedes the second invasion of Iraq by about 8 years, but the previous one, the Operation Desert Storm, was just before this,
1991,
and you know,
1991 or
a
something. Yeah.
coalition of forces, the United Nations being involved in this, and kind of giving the United States the go ahead with dealing with Saddam Hussein and his invasion of Kuwait. So key terms like that, like invasion and earth, and it's just kind of like flowing around and kind of swirling around in the 90s. And you're right, like the Hollywood storytellers just kind of put their butterfly net up and catch a couple of these things. They're like, all right, here we go, there's our conflict, there's we have something else going on. And we can't just have these netherworlds just invading for no reason. They have to have some kind of legal precedence for this.
Yes, yes, and they're at 9 wins. They need 10.
Right.
Very specific. Why not 5? Right.
Best
2 out of 3.
Where did the judicial branch
from? What if there's a 10?
Yeah, and is 10 counted the same way in every
multiverse?
Yeah. How do they consider a win? Is it 10 consecutive wins or just 10 wins in general?
I
don't know. I think we joke, but I guarantee you that if this movie, and you just mentioned, they did come up with another version this year, but if this kind of thing, I think it's part of our culture, part of our society to, if something is proving to be at all popular and mainstream, we oversaturate everything with it. So I guess I probably looked, I'm sure there's probably some kind of book that explains this even more in depth. I doubt they sold it at the Scholastic, book sale, but I used to get all of my, movie, like I had the book for Hook. I had Home Alone, the book. I actually read the book before I saw the movie. I felt like Bart Simpson, and
that's a whole other conversation. Movie. So this past, I'm getting a little off subject, and I apologize, but like, we had mentioned, New Line Cinema and Nightmare on Elm Street the other day or earlier, and I watched it the other day again for the first time. And that end of that movie, not to give it away, spoilers if you haven't seen a movie that's well over 30 years old. The end of that movie is very much the template for Home Alone, where she's trying to bring him into the house and trap him, and with all these traps and tricks. And I'm watching it and I'm going, how did I not recognize this? That Kevin McAllister is this young girl who's being chased by a demon. And she's trapping him with all these little tricks and fire hoses and everything else.
That's a great point, and that's a solid 6 years before Home Alone came out. But essentially it's the same generation of kids though that they're speaking to, and it's like the latchkey kid, nobody's listening to me, nobody believes me, I'm telling you what happened, and well, I guess I got to solve this problem myself. Mom and dad are either not here, or they're not, if they are, they're not interested in what I have to say. And the exact same thing happens. We're recording this, by the way, in November, and it's not yet Thanksgiving, but my family kind of broke our no Home Alone viewing until Thanksgiving rule the other day, because we had an early Thanksgiving at our house, and so we're like, all right, Home Alone, got to put that on. And every time I watch it, not only do I love it, but I think the same thing. I'm like, this is completely for the generation that grew up in that time, that his parents are busy, both working parents. They both have all these, the movie starts out with the mom on the phone talking, and hardly paying half attention to Kevin, and same thing with the dad. And you get the sense that he's one of several kids, so he's easily going to be forgotten about, and he does get forgotten about. But on a day-to-day realistic basis for people our age growing up in that time, because of some of the
we took care of ourselves.
The economy of the time period, it was such that in order to make ends meet, a lot of times parents had to work 2 jobs or have each a job, and so it wasn't a stay-at-home parent to come home to, and so you did have to fend for yourself, thankfully not to that degree, but
There was
so
always there was always paint cans around, though. Paint cans. So we could have taken care of anything that came our way.
Just tie it up, and if paint cans had showed up in Mortal Kombat, I think people would have walked out of the theater like, not this again. We did this a couple years ago.
We just did this. Yeah.
Is that no? All we're doing is paint cans. Johnny Cage and his paint cans. So I'm really glad that we got to talk about this, because the point of this podcast is to focus in on things that would otherwise be overlooked, bypassed, not thought of as a primary source at all. Who would think of a movie that was so silly and seemingly so forgettable to be something so telling of the time period? So I really appreciate
really rooted itself into our pop culture and moving forward. It cemented itself.
Yeah. And future generations will be looking back at the time when the mythology of Mortal Kombat began and envying us for living in that era of we not only be able to play it in its original format, but also to go see it in the theater for the very first time. It's funny to imagine what future generations will think about this, but if they stumble across that or this podcast, they'll have a great time of looking at the insights. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. And
I had a blast. Thanks for having me.
I hope we can do it again in the future.
Absolutely.
All right. So thanks for joining us, everybody, on the EPS podcast, where everything, including the Mortal Kombat 1995 movie, is a primary source.
And that's it.